Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jim Wunderman, the President and CEO of the Bay Area Council. I'd like to welcome you to the Bay Area Council's Impact Series. We've been holding these webinars since the pandemic really took hold, and we felt we had a lot of demand for information and context as folks want to understand how the pandemic is affecting society and culture, and certainly the economy of our region and our state. And it's been very, very successful. There's been a lot of attention to a whole number of issues. And so we push forward. And today we have California's Lieutenant Governor, Ambassador Eleni Kounalakis, and Barbara Humpton, who's the President and CEO of Siemens USA, talking with us about California's resilient and inclusive future. This should be a very, very exciting conversation today. And after remarks come from each guest, we'll have a moderated discussion. I'll be asking some questions, and then we'll have an opportunity for you as the audience to ask questions. Just use the Q&A feature on your screen, and I'll try to get to as many as possible. We often get a lot of questions, so I'll try to do my best to group them together and so forth. So I'm going to give a brief introduction of each guest. They're both terrific, and we'll hear directly from Lieutenant Governor and Barbara Humpton. And I'll be asking each of you to make opening remarks. What keeps you up at night? What are you thinking about? What are you worried about? What are you excited about? Obviously, with a new administration in Washington, D.C., it's a time of new opportunities and so forth. So I'll turn it over to you in a moment, but let me introduce each of you. And again, thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with our audience. So Eleni Kounalakis is the 50th Lieutenant Governor of the great state of California and the first woman to be elected Lieutenant Governor. Governor Newsom appointed Eleni Kounalakis as California's representative for international affairs and trade, which is a really important responsibility. And the Bay Area Council has been fortunate enough to work directly with you on a number of initiatives, including a trip to India a year ago, a little over a year ago. It seems like, I don't know, maybe longer ago, but that was one of the less exciting things we did before the pandemic really got the best of us. Eleni Kounalakis served as President Obama's ambassador to the Republic of Hungary. Kunalakis was the first Greek-American woman, and at age 43, one of America's youngest, to serve as the United States ambassador. As a native Californian, Kunalakis was president of one of California's most respected housing development firms. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about housing during this conversation. She's passionate about early childhood development, something we share, and served as a member of California's first 5 commission and the California Blue Ribbon Commission on Autism. So welcome, Lieutenant Governor Ambassador Kunalakis. Let me introduce Barbara Humpton. She is President and CEO of Siemens USA, where she guides the company's strategy and engagement in serving the company's largest market in the world. Siemens USA employs approximately 40,000 people, serving customers in all 50 states, as well as Puerto Rico. Prior to Siemens, Humpton was at Booz Allen Hamilton and was responsible for technology consulting in the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. Earlier, Humpton was a vice president at Lockheed Martin Corporation with responsibility for biometrics, programs, border and transportation security, critical infrastructure protection, including critical programs for the FBI and TSA, which means she can't talk about probably most of it, if anything. And among other things, Barbara serves on the board of directors of the American Heart Association, the Triumph Group, and the National Association of Manufacturers. So welcome, both of you. Thanks for coming on today. Let me turn it over to you, Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis. Big changes happening in our country. Give us a few thoughts. What are you thinking about and what are you seeing?
Well, first of all, Jim, let me say thank you to you and to the Bay Area Council for bringing us all together. It is a great honor to be here with you as always, but especially today with you, Barbara. You're just such an extraordinary leader as a woman in the corporate world. Rising to your leadership role is something that's very inspiring to so many women out there who aspire to do the same. What am I thinking about? Well, first and foremost, Jim, I'm thinking about the vaccine rollout. This has been a long journey here in California for the last year, since almost a year since we issued the first stay-at-home order in the country, because we are a science-based state and we listen to the experts. You all remember the frenzied drive to acquire PPE, the devastating effects of shutting down our businesses, the inspiring work to try to allow businesses to reopen with all kinds of modifications. And now here we are after a very tough winter, flattening that curve again, reopening businesses to some degree. Most of the state is now in the purple tier. And the absolute necessity to get as many of the vaccines in people's arms as possible. California's received about 7 million doses. We have administered about 4 million. The effort to streamline and make the process of vaccinations go faster and more efficiently is happening. I am absolutely convinced that we're going to get better at this. But at the same time, with the state of 40 million people and with the 2 vaccines currently being administered needing 2 doses, 7 million vaccines is just the beginning of what is going to be a massive rollout and effort to get Californians vaccinated. So that is very much on my mind. But what I thought I would do is very briefly for this audience, and again, because I've had the opportunity to work with you with Bay Area Council, of course, Siemens is a German company. The Office of the Lieutenant Governor focuses on 3 main areas: public higher education. I could talk all day about our CSUs, our UCs, and our community colleges. Environmental issues. I'm the chair of the State Lands Commission. I sit on the Ocean Protections Council and on the Coastal Commission. And then, of course, the governor, very early on, after we were both sworn in, asked me, and in fact signed an executive order designating me as California's representative for international trade and investments. The talk today, when we talk about a resilient future for our state, so much of that is in and around the green economy and California's leadership in setting the standards, in setting the goals, and in putting the wheels, getting the wheels moving in order to move us toward a new energy future. And so I know we're going to talk in detail about that, but just on the very high level, when we talk about trade in this state, some of the statistics I think are very telling. Number one, Barbara, I'm sure you're very well aware of this. California is the largest consumer market in the country. So when we set standards here, it doesn't just affect the 40 million people in our state, it sets the standard for other parts of the country as well. We also we are home to the largest port complex in North America, in Los Angeles and Long Beach. 40% of all the containerized cargo entering the US arrives through California ports, and about 20% of our jobs are supported by trade and FDI. We lead the nation in exports right now. As it happens, for 2020, our largest export was zero emission vehicles. So all of this sort of sets the foundation, I think, for what we're going to do a little bit, I hope, a little bit of a deeper dive on in terms of what that clean energy future from a practical matter is likely to mean for the economic rebuilding of our state post-COVID-19.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Lieutenant Governor. And you're obviously in a very nice location, and I can imagine that a lot of our participants wish they could just jump in the pool with you. I might be among them, but maybe we'll save that for later in the afternoon. Let me turn to CEO Barbara Humpton. And what an interesting time to be leading a major business in times of change and intense rethinking of demand and approach. Talk about what's happening at Siemens. What are you doing that you're most proud of that you're doing? What's challenging you? What's different?
Jim, thank you. First, thank you for having me as part of this discussion. And Lieutenant Governor, I'm just thrilled we'll have a chance to delve into some of these topics that you're leading in California. And Jim, you're absolutely right. is a remarkable moment for Siemens. And Siemens in the USA, I think of us as a national asset. The company's been in the US for over 160 years. And we've been in California for over 7 decades. Think about that. And if we look at it, we say, you know, the last decade was really about connecting people. And you think about all of the technology that has come into the marketplace and allowed us to create a vibrant communication, entertainment, and consumer basis that's actually been brilliant in helping us through the pandemic. Well, this next decade is going to be about connecting our infrastructure. And actually, Siemens employees in the Bay Area are going to be playing a really critical part of that. I mean, if I just quickly take a walk around the Bay Area, 2,800 employees, 5,000 in California writ large. But, you know, if I stop in Santa Clara and San Jose, I'll find Comfy and Enlighted, 2 IoT companies that are helping us create better, safer work environments. I could move then down into Palo Alto and visit Next 47, our venture capital arm. What they're working on is trying to identify startups who are game changers in the industries that we care about. But let's then scoot over to Mountain View and take a look at an ultrasound customer showplace that Siemens Healthineers has set up, or drive around to Berkeley and see the molecular lab they have set up there. Maybe my favorite spot of all, though, is to go north to Sacramento and to look at a site that is powered predominantly by renewable energy, and then takes parts made in America and assembles trains. I've seen metal go in one end and full out locomotives coming out the other end. It's a remarkable, remarkable organization capable of addressing the major challenges ahead of us today in built infrastructure, in the future of manufacturing, and of course, the future of mobility. I'll just share with everybody that throughout the pandemic, I mean, I think like all organizations, we've gone through the classic, you know, sort of first respond, how are we going to get through this, to then begin to recover and realize that obviously we need to make adjustments, and then to look forward and be more resilient as we look to the future. So in terms of our response, I was proud to be partnering with the state of California, working on things such as assuring adequate medical facilities, making sure that buildings were able to stay open, and you know, overall supporting the public response. That continues, by the way, because one of the key assets we have in Siemens Healthineers is a total antibody test that we think is going to be absolutely essential in analyzing overall population health going forward. Now, when we look then at how do we go about reopening and how do we bring the skills of Siemens to bear, I'll share with you that we're working with many in the California economy, and particularly in the Bay Area. I mentioned Enlighted and Comfy. Imagine our partnership with Salesforce and how we've been able to bring together our joint skills to bring a new capability for gaining control of an office space and the built environment, and assuring that we have tools in place to understand its overall health and the health of the workplace for those who may want to use it. These are going to be critical skills for how we operate together. Now, the second thing we've been focused on is energy and this transformation that's going on even while we're in the midst of the pandemic. We all know that access to electricity has been absolutely critical to us as we become more and more digital. And so some of the things we bring into California, such as microgrids, have really proven themselves. A quick story. Blue Lake Rancheria is a federally recognized tribe in the northwest of California. And several years ago, they approached Siemens and asked about putting up a microgrid. And they were interested in renewable energy and the ability then to island from the grid. We helped them establish that. And what we found was during wildfire season, that came in as a tremendous help because they were actually able to island. They were able to keep power on while the rest of the surrounding area actually had to be shut down for the safety of all the communities around them. They became, in essence, a power supply. And what was fascinating was we saw sort of the opposite happen during the start of the pandemic, when everyone worried that a sudden drop in use in for us, office use, et cetera, might actually affect the grid. The controls that we had put in place at Blue Lake Rancheria actually detected the fluctuations, the changes, and adjusted automatically. So as we think about our future, our energy future, I'd love to talk further about the use of microgrids. Now, all of this is to say, it's moments of disruption that give us the greatest opportunity to create the future that we want. Haven't we all had that experience of saying, man, everything is changing? Well, in this moment when everything is changing, we're able to put our imagination and creativity to work on what is the future we want. We know we want the future to be more sustainable, more equitable. We know that we have the technology available today to be able to address so many of the challenges that have uncovered as we've dealt with a health crisis, an economic crisis, and a societal crisis, all within a single 12-month period. So the question is, how do we work together? Business, government, really across our society to help build that future. I look forward to being a partner in that, look forward to the discussion with this particular group who I know is loaded with ideas. Thank you, Jim.
Well, thank you very much, Barbara. That's what we're going to do today is we're going to solve for that little issue. And, both of your opening statements just, you create the opportunity for a dialogue that is unfortunately limited to about 45 minutes or so from here, which really could cover the whole day. I wish we had that amount of time because these are big questions and big opportunities for our future. But we'll do as much as we can and set the stage for further conversations. Let me start with you, Lieutenant Governor. We now have a new president just in office for a couple of weeks. Vice President of the United States is a woman and a friend from here in California. So the cards in the deck are way different now. New members of the administration. We have a Senate that is effectively controlled by the Democratic Party as well as the House of Representatives. So maybe there's some opportunities to do things a little bit differently. On the issue, we're focused here today on issues around climate change, resilience, equity. One of the first things President Biden did out of the gate wasn't a huge surprise, but I suspect important, was to announce America's re-entry into the Paris Accord. So I wanted to start with that and ask you, how significant, California's been carrying a lot of this load, as you know, and I think been doing a great job, kind of keeping that conversation going internationally, not our natural position. But now America is back in the game. What does that mean for our country? And what does it mean for our state?
So there's a lot to unpack there, but maybe I should start by the question that you asked about what it means to have Senator Kamala Harris as the first woman vice president of the United States, our own senator. Having her with her perspective of how things work in California is going to be very important. She is the daughter of two immigrants. 27% of Californians are foreign born. 1 out of every 2 of us have at least one parent, like Vice President Harris, who is foreign born. So she sees the future through the California lens. And she's not the only one, by the way, who has gone to Washington with this administration. People may not know that our new Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, has been living in Berkeley, even though she was governor of Michigan. Janet Yellen was on one of our task forces, the governor's task force for economic recovery, living in California. We have Javier Becerra on his way, hopefully, pending Senate confirmation, to be the new Secretary of Health. So a lot of Californians, Julie Su is going to be Deputy for Labor. A lot of Californians are making their way back to Washington, D.C. And part of it is, just as you say, because these last 4 years, California has really risen to the challenge of making sure that all of the elements that have made the United States great, whether it's being forward leaning on environmental issues, because I was part of the Obama administration. We drove the Paris Climate Accord, to, of course, being the standard bearer for recognizing the importance of healthy immigration policy to our culture and to our economy. So I think it's going to have an enormous difference, but probably more than anything else is just to be able to work with our federal partners in a positive way instead of what we've had the last 4 years, which is frankly just being under siege. So as we know, since the 70s, California has had the authority to set our own emission standards. This, again, I'm in Southern California. The air of Los Angeles was cleaned up through those initiatives, which led to federal standards on emissions and cleaning up the air in the whole country. We are at another inflection point. Again, I know we're going to go deeper into zero emission vehicles and how important it is, but California has been we've been the standard bearer for the last 4 years. And now, we talked about this before we came on, we have a $15 billion budget surplus going into this recovery for our state. And the governor's been very clear that investing in the green recovery, particularly now that we no longer have to fear, certainly not for the next 4 and hopefully 8 years and hopefully beyond, being stripped of the authority to set our own emission standards, which are absolutely critical in being able to reach our 2045 goals, which again, are the most aggressive in the country.
Yeah, very seems like a very exciting opportunity for us. We now have a chance to step forward and really lead the country with a president who sees what we've been doing and a vice president as a positive step rather than something that's somehow against industry. Barbara, let me ask you to take off on something the Lieutenant Governor raised, which is EVs, electric vehicles. GM made this announcement last week. It's a pretty big deal. And now they're advertising it. And, I understand there's 50 or 60 new EVs coming and hitting the market. And, the question goes to infrastructure. What do we have to do? This is incredibly exciting, but what do we have to do in order to see this through here in our state and as well in the country?
Yeah, this is are we really going to take on Norway? I think that's what I learned in the Super Bowl last night. We're going to take on Norway. Well, and in order to make that work, obviously, we're going to need several things to come into play and come into play rapidly. One is obviously we need charging infrastructure. I know that folks around urban areas are happy about the idea of being able to get into an electric vehicle, feeling that there's going to be, ample supply of charging stations, et cetera. We at Siemens have installed 65,000 across the United States in the last several years, but we know it's a daunting task to reach the levels that we're going to need. And I'll tell you, one of the most important things we see here is the need for open standards. I mean, this is something that's really been fundamental to the growth of so much of the tech industry, and especially as we talked about earlier, in the things that connect us as people. Now that we're talking about connecting our built infrastructure, we are avid supporters of the idea of open standards so that many can play in this space and we can get great competition going as the charging infrastructure rolls out. In fact, we've joined the Zero Emission Transportation Association. That's one of the points that they're going to be absolutely vocal about. But moving on from that, obviously the other thing is we're going to need to rethink the supply of electricity into urban centers. I mean, think about it. You convert all of sort of gas-powered vehicles into electricity. We're going to need to make a lot more electric load available. That take transmission and distribution. We're working with the state right now on a lot of ideas around that. But another aspect of this is a lot of fun is seeing new business models pop up. For instance, that Next 27 team I told you about, venture capital arm, they identified a company, Amply, also a Bay Area asset, who has been working on new business models. So if you're the owner of a fleet of, say, buses or trucks, and you want to make the conversion to electric, you say, wait, how do I manage all the fluctuations in electricity price, throughout the day? Used to be I'd buy my fuel at some standard rate and it was predictable. What Amply does is basically do power purchase agreements, takes that risk off the desk of the fleet owner, takes that on themselves, bundles all that, and then with their knowledge of the electricity market, they're able to manage the puts and takes at high and low cost times for charging, and then using those vehicles for storage as well. It's exciting because this is really the tipping point. A lot of people have asked me about, when do things really change here? It really changes when we bring vehicles onto the infrastructure and begin to have this two-way supply of electricity flowing day in, day out.
Yeah, it's really tremendous. I'm the chairman of the Water Emergency Transportation Authority in the Bay Area, which runs the ferry system, and it's been growing. And we've been buying for the last decade or more with a fair amount of capital investment, the cleanest Tier 4 engines available in the world. So I think we have the cleanest fleet, but it's not clean enough. So we just received a state grant a few months ago to begin to procure an all-electric vessel that we're going to use to run from the ferry building or Treasure Island over to Mission Bay. I'm sure it'll have other applications. And from that, we'll learn how to operate a boat like that. But in order to operate the boat, you have to have the infrastructure that goes along with it. So half the cost is going to be figuring out how that infrastructure can work to ultimately operate what I hope to become, the world's first functional electric fleet. We do have some competition, Norway, of course,
and in the state of
always
Washington,
Norway.
I'll share with you. We can take you just a little further north too, and introduce you to some operators. So
well, we may need the help, but it's the future, and as long as we can get it right in terms of how to convert those electrons, properly to for their application. Let's go back. I'm going to ask Lieutenant Governor to comment back on the issue you raised earlier, which is something just as we got into the pandemic. We ended up in wildfire season. And although we've been getting used to this, we weren't used to having, I think, 5 of the 6 of the largest wildfires in California history burning at the same time. And we all know the damage that did and the impact that had on the physical environment, and I think on our psyche. And you mentioned the application of microgrids as part of the solution to this, but I think I'll start with you, Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis. What can we do besides turn the power off to make sure that these fires don't start in the first place? Because that doesn't seem to be the ultimate solution to this. And I'll get back to you, Barbara, to follow up the Lieutenant Governor's comments.
Well, Jim, first and foremost, recognition that the worst wildfire season in recorded California history that happened in 2020, more than 4.2 million acres, 4% of the landmass of the state of California burned. The first time we've had, again, in recorded history, a fire of over 1 million acres. This is being driven by climate change. Dry lightning strikes, something that had occurred in the past, but nothing like the complex of dry lightning strikes that occurred last year. Fire tornadoes, winds carrying fires at the rate of a football field per second, a very, very dry forest with a forest die-off of something around 150 million trees because of drought and the pine bark beetle infestations that ensued. This is all new and driven by climate change. And you talk to firefighters, at least the firefighters I talk to, when they talk about the rate that these fires travel because of these wind events, that this is a different battle that we're up against today than we were at any time prior to the last 10 years. So what does that mean? Number one, we know that one of the most important things that we can do is find the fires at the moment that they break out, forward deploy equipment in order to put fires out quickly before they become catastrophic, which is very difficult with these high winds. That is key. And so there's quite a bit of work being done, installing cameras in forests, more fire breaks to try to cut them down. But again, we know that with these winds, they can jump massive fire breaks, including 8-lane highways. So in terms of breaking up the grids, we know that San Diego did a lot of good work down there that was not replicated by PG&E. These microgrids are extremely important, and government is looking for ways to streamline and recognize that if a regulatory process stands in the way of building microgrids, we need to focus on this in order to be able to ensure that in places where they're appropriate and can be built out, that we're able to do that, because it can make a very big difference. So those are some of the things that we're looking at, but definitely breaking up the grid is a very important part of it. Ensuring that government is part of the solution to do that and to see more microgrids built, and then catching these fires as soon as possible and forward deploying equipment to put them out before they become catastrophic.
Thank you very much. Barbara, you raised this issue, and I think the Lieutenant Governor made some important points on the how we're able to come up with a regulatory schema that enables microgrids to be put into place. What do you see as the needs for supporting that? How do we act as a state in order to really kind of get behind this and make it happen as quickly and effectively as possible?
Well, first of all, I applaud California for the work in reducing regulatory barriers. That's got to be the number one issue, right? The real issue we're dealing with is this is the world's most complex machine, the electric grid. And the fact is it's been built up over decades, and now we're talking about making changes. That the technology is moving rapidly, and the risks, the benefits are moving around, amongst stakeholders, and so utilities are grappling, end users are grappling with what to do. Now, I'll share with you, again, technology, I don't believe is going to be the hurdle here. I think it's going to be mainly about assessing, who bears the risk, who bears the responsibility, where does risk and opportunity flow, if you will. And so I think it does help to have government engagement in these highly regulated areas. As we focus specifically on fires, I'll tell you that our work with utilities is very focused, right? They understand that maintaining equipment, maintaining the natural environment, and also then ongoing monitoring and controls are key. And so we're proud to provide technologies that serve as both surge arresters, recloser, the tools of the trade that help keep the grid safe. I recognize not all of the fires in the season were caused that way. Some were caused by human error, but they were all exacerbated by the climate change, as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned. So coming to that, I wanted to share with you just a perspective that I've been thrilled to see, even in the absence of the US engagement in the Paris Climate Accord. Business stepped up, communities stepped up, local government, state government stepped up and said, here are the things in our control and the things that we will do to take action. We at Siemens back in 2015 had made our own commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030. And we said we were going to be halfway there by 2020, and I'm pleased to say we exceeded the halfway point as we closed 2020. Companies need to understand, and I'm seeing signs that is absolutely the case. It starts with the financial investors now who are saying, hey, we're not going to make money available. Capital just won't be available to companies unless they are acting on this urgent call. And so I'm counting on the business community. I'm actually optimistic that the business community is going to play a huge role in this. So Lieutenant Governor, as we work toward the transformation of the microgrids, please, I hope that you'll call on Siemens, among other experts, to help advise in what that transformation can look like, what technology can help us do. It's going to take that kind of dialogue, I think, to get to the right answer.
Thanks. Lieutenant Governor, did you want to respond to that at all? You're on mute.
My apologies. Barbara, I decided to sit outside today because it's sort of my infomercial to you of how beautiful and extraordinary California is. I'm down in the desert, the microclimate down here at 73 degrees. And as you mentioned, there was this great GM ad going to compete with Sweden on, but the fact of the matter is that California, that's where Will Ferrell and his friends are, who decided to stand up and make a pilgrimage to go and take on the rest of the world. So we are very much committed to this. And when it comes to the specific issue of microgrids, California has already been investing. The Public Utilities Commission has committed about $200 million so far for microgrids. The state of California, I believe it's through the our Energy Commission, has committed another 85 million. So it's more than just words. There's actually now investment by government to help support those who have the ability and the facility to go in and break up the grid, both in order to prevent wildfires, but also to minimize the impacts on business and people's lives when, as we've seen in these PSPSs, we have to shut down large parts of our state, even in neighborhoods where the wind isn't blowing at all. So definitely this is an area that the opportunity for public-private partnership is enormous, and the commitment is certainly there on the side of the state.
Thank you. Yeah, quite a shock to all of us. We I think have come to take California's incredible advantages in climate and the environment for granted. And then the last couple of years, and especially last year, so it was a real shock to our system and a rethinking. And we want to make sure we do whatever it takes to get past that. I wanted to talk quickly. I want to turn it over to questions from the participants. And one of the things I would point out is in terms of business response, the Bay Area Council sponsors a program called the California Resilience Challenge, in which we raise money from the private sector and philanthropy and support innovative projects from local governments and local constituencies that are focused on solutions to fire, to drought, to heat and flood impacts of climate change. So I'll ask my team to put that up for folks to be able to click on that if people are interested. But amazing projects, and we're at it again in 2021, and we're going to be really focusing on communities of concern this year. Those areas of the state that are most impacted by climate change, which tend to be communities of low income and where people of color tend to reside. So I wanted to get into that because I think it's a big part of the conversation today is, how do we balance these needs? Climate change doesn't hit us all equally, and it tends to be the case that people in poor and minority communities get impacted more. And we've been at this, we've had a strong goal to address climate change that we've been operating on for a while. Maybe some of the solutions are helping, maybe they're creating new challenges. So I'll start with you, Lieutenant Governor, on this one, but I'd like to ask both of you, how do we handle the balance of this and make sure that our poorest communities are their needs are being addressed?
So you mentioned that I was in housing for about 18 years before going into public service. And it's just a reality that the way that our state developed, and it's common elsewhere in the country as well, is that more disadvantaged communities tend to be near the freeways. They tend to be near the train tracks. They tend to be near the ports. They tend to be near the areas where there's more pollution. And so what environmental justice leaders have been working so hard to do, and to, again, the credit of many people in government, they're listening to environmental justice activists in this space. We have all the data that shows the heightened levels of asthma in communities that are underserved communities, again, near areas where there's a lot of infrastructure and transportation and emissions. So this is an environmental justice issue. There is simply no question about it. And the governor and the legislature have, and again, statewide elected officials are committed to an equitable recovery. And that is yet another reason why tackling emissions and getting more zero emission vehicles on the road and getting to our new goals that we're setting in order to ultimately achieve our 2045 goals is so important. Just to draw back the lens on this, in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions in this state, about 41% of all greenhouse gas emissions come from cars, passenger cars, and light utility. Another 11% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from the oil refineries that produce the fuel for these cars. So more than half of our greenhouse gas emissions in this state come from people driving in combustion engines and light utility cars, and doing it on freeways that tend to be close to these underserved communities. If we are serious about really making a difference in terms of greenhouse gas emissions for our state, and by extension, again, because we're the largest consumer market in the country, which is the largest economy in the world, the United States, we simply have to transition to zero emission vehicles, to electric cars, to hydrogen. We have to do it. And that is what Governor Newsom identified early on. He says, okay, previous governors set all the goals, but if we're going to reach those goals, people have to drive cars that are very, very different. And his leadership, our leadership in California in this space, is already clear that we're the ones who are going to make the difference. So I would say to everybody watching, jump on the ZEV bandwagon. We are doing this. We have a $15 billion budget surplus. The governor has designated $1.5 billion in his budget. He may have to fight for it. We need all the help we can get, but $1.5 billion to go toward the infrastructure to get us where we need to go. Because as Barbara rightly noted, this kind of a transformation in what cars look like and how they fuel is going to require massive changes to the electric grid in order to support it. We need our partners like Siemens. We need the incredible innovative culture of this state to step up and help us get there.
Lieutenant Governor, can I just add, so count on us. We actually have a fleet initiative ourselves. What we discovered in our carbon footprint was that about half of the issue we had to deal with was our fleet of buildings. And we've got lots of technologies to help us solve that problem. We're well on our way. It's making that switch to vehicles. And so I'm delighted that states have stepped up, delighted with your fleet initiative. And it's going to be this, the market building up that's going to allow us to reach that tipping point and get there.
Great. Let me thank you very much, and let me turn it over to the audience to have some questions. And we have a lot of questions, so we won't be able to hit them all, but I'll ask, I'll try to hit as many as we can, as quickly as we can. On the subject of buildings, since we started talking about that, Hans Corvey writes, so frustrating to see California still not requiring new vertical construction to include solar panels and battery storage, for that matter. Will that change? Lieutenant Governor, what do you think?
Well, there's a lot of effort and work being done on improving battery capacity. I sit on the UC Regents Board, and in that capacity, I also serve on the subcommittee for our national laboratories. Figuring out these other pieces like energy efficiency of our buildings, like improving battery storage capacity. So all those solar panels and all those wind turbines, we're able to use the benefit of those even when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. We didn't even talk about carbon capture, another thing. These things are being studied in laboratories, whether it's through government funding or through the private sector. It's incredibly important. And again, because I was in the housing construction industry, about 25%, I talked about more than half of our greenhouse gas emissions coming from our cars and trucks, but about 25% come from our buildings. So improving efficiency is something that we've been working on for a long time. We have a long way to go. I encourage people to continue through the private sector to help us. What more can we do to help you get there with these technologies? Because we're absolutely going to need them to get to our goals. And encourage all of you who see the incredible business opportunities available to you by being first movers and innovators in this space.
Jim, if I may add briefly, when Siemens actually engaged with the city of San Francisco, with doing an analysis of its sustainability plan, we used a tool, our city performance tool. What we discovered is in San Francisco itself, 60% of greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings. This vertical building challenge is real. What's fascinating is that we have the chance to use energy savings performance contracting, if possible, right? To financial instruments that will allow us to use the sheer energy savings generated by upgrades to deal with our current built infrastructure. And then I've been wondering about this. Do we need stronger regulation, or will our societal pressures, will our consumer markets actually demand the changes at this time? I think it's going to take a little bit of both.
Indeed, it probably will. By the way, we did get a note from our friend, the Consul General of Norway, Joe Sletback, who said, we welcome the competition, with a smiley face. So we're always happy to work with our partners internationally as well. And we did a study on the Bay Area's ties with Norway and other countries. This is our most recent study, Lieutenant Governor, with Australia, just hot off the press. And we're working with other countries. Could I ask you really quickly, Lieutenant Governor, how do you see California's international trade capabilities changing with the new administration? Will we be more aggressive about it now, or is there some opportunities for the private sector and the public sector to work more closely together?
So first of all, the Consul General from Norway, it's on, and great to have him here with all of us. So it is a very exciting time, Jim. I mean, I think in many ways in our office, and I know throughout the administration, it's really a question of what do we do first? It's an incredible opportunity now that California really extended beyond ourselves during the last 4 years to be able to elevate our initiatives and, frankly, our the way that California is disproportionately impacted by so many federal policies, bring the things that we know and communicate with leadership around them. Immigration is very much part of this. I mentioned we're 27% foreign born. 10% of our workforce in this state is, by most estimates, undocumented. We have to have comprehensive immigration reform. We cannot have our people, because they are our people, many folks who have been here for decades, living in fear. We've got to address this. And in terms of trade, our imports during the pandemic went down, but not that much. They went down about 5% during the pandemic in 2020. But the year before they had been up. So imports were fairly much on track. Exports went down about 12%, but it is less likely that our reduction of California exports were because of the pandemic, and more likely that it was because of the tariffs disputes that Donald Trump engaged us in. Now, I know Tony Blinken. I served in the Obama administration. I was the State Department senior U.S. government official. We have an amazing team that is going in between Tony's team at the State Department and Jake Sullivan over at as the National Security Advisor. The questions that they are asking about what the direction the United States goes in this current post-Trump environment are going to be very big. I think it's a little early, at least for me, to be speculating on exactly what's going to happen in terms of trade, but I do know that there will be a significant focus in working more closely with our allies and our partners in the world. And then, of course, how exactly they de-escalate tensions with China and deal with the challenges with the Uyghurs. You might all have seen that tomatoes and cotton right before the Trump administration left, there was a moratorium on imports of those products because of the situation with the Uyghurs. So there's a lot of questions out there, but a focus on working with our allies and our partners in Europe, certainly Germany, partners like Japan. My sense is that we are going to be doing more to take advantage of working with our partners and allies in the world in the area of lifting all of us up through economic development in the post-COVID environment.
We certainly hope so, and as you know, we're your partners in seeing that through. You used among the statements you made, you brought up the issue of workforce. So I want to ask Barbara a question. It's really on the minds of many. Comes up in almost every conversation with business leaders that we have, and we have a lot. So the pandemic has caused us all to be working the way we're working right now, remotely. And yet, now we have a vaccine program, and I'm glad to hear your confidence that we're going to be able to accelerate it, and obviously need more supplies in order to make that happen. But Barbara, tell us about your thoughts and Siemens' thoughts about how we're going to actually go back to work. What are your plans? What do you see happening in the environment? Because inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we're not going back, we're going forward. And here's what it looks like to us. Yes, about a third of our population of employees needs to be at a workplace, whether that's a factory, whether it's a customer's location, so on and so forth, out making service calls, et cetera. But that means 2/3 of our employees really don't. And what we've learned over this past year is just how effective people can be when they stay connected and if they have safe and healthy work environments. So our plan is that we're empowering all employees who can to work a day or two from home or wherever they choose for the foreseeable future. I know that I have some employees who've said, hey, I'm moving halfway across the country to be closer to family. And they'll deal with time changes, et cetera. Whereas others, we've been thinking a little bit about, will people be moving out of cities, et cetera. Turns out we're all different, and people are making all kinds of different choices, and that's okay.
Well, a lot to be seen, I think, in future, in the months ahead, to see how different organizations handle this. And by the way, these subjects are on international trade and investment, and on how we work. These are actually responding to questions that you folks are asking. Very timely question. Jeffrey Heller, one of our top architects, asked a question back to forest management. Don't we need to look both at zoning and forest management as part of wildfire policy? And I think I'll extend that question on another one that was raised on housing in general. So Governor Newsom last year spoke of the need to produce over 3 million units of housing around the state. Because we have such an imbalance in jobs and housing, we have a lot of greenhouse gas emissions that occur just because we don't have a very green system. How do we figure out how to deregulate the system in a way on the housing side that accomplishes that? And what do we need to do from a zoning and forestry management perspective, when it comes to zoning? Should we just keep building in areas that are prone to wildfires?
So what do we have? 3 minutes left, and we're going to take on Let me just say to the first question about where to build, one of the things that is determining that already is the lack of an ability of people to get insurance now in these parts of the state that are prone to wildfires. And one thing that I would really like to see is a real refocus on building materials and how we can build in a more hardened way.
Mhm.
Friends of mine send me pictures all the time from areas of Napa, Sonoma, where things have burned down and they're rebuilding with wood fences. We really need to be thinking about how to harden what we build in the states, in the areas. That's just kind of one thought I had. The person who asked the question is correct. Last year, pre-COVID, the governor devoted his entire state of the state to housing and homelessness. And here we are, housing is 16% more expensive, pardon me, in the state of California than it was a year ago. People wanting to move into parts of the state where they can get a little more elbow room. They don't have to be in an apartment in San Francisco. So they buy a house in Sacramento or elsewhere and telecommute. That's given people more opportunities. We need more housing. That is the bottom line. And I, for one, have not forgotten how incredibly important this policy issue is for our state. I looked up the other day, Jim, I didn't know if you'd asked me about it, but you said that we cannot be business climate deniers in the state of California. I am not a business climate denier. We cannot take one job in our state for granted. But when you look at some of the most important factors that drive where companies want to locate, our median price for a house in California is over $700,000. In Texas, it's about $260,000. That makes a huge difference for family. We have to tackle this. There's no magic wand, but streamlining approach that we can build more and at the same time do it in a way that doesn't undermine our protection of our beautiful California environment.
Thank you. And, it's, we ask our executives all the time, and while taxes and regulations are high on the charts when it comes to the issues that affect business decisions, the housing is number one. And if you can't, if your employees can't have a place to live, so that sort of ends the debate in a time, as Barbara described, when companies are going more and more to say, not going to be constraining when it comes to where employees live. So I think it's a whole new day, and we need to accept that we're in a very different world now. Barbara, I'll give you 30, 40 seconds to close, and I'll ask Lieutenant Governor to do the same. And thank you very, very much. This is being recorded, and we will provide a link to everyone to, if you haven't gotten enough of it today. And we had a ton of questions I couldn't get to, and they were all very, very good. So Barbara, why don't you some closing remarks?
Jim, thank you. Honestly, what a privilege to be with the two of you today and with this wonderful audience. Great questions. I mean, we're dealing with massive, massive challenges right now, but I'm optimistic. We have fantastic thinkers. We've got great technology. We have obviously wonderful relationships between the business community and government. And so for Siemens, I'm proud to be part of the business climate environment of both the Bay Area and California writ large. Thanks.
And thanks for leading such a great company. I've visited Sacramento, where I've been on those trains when they're in the factory, and it's very, very exciting. Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis, thank you always for your leadership. Please.
Great to be with you. I live in San Francisco. The Bay Area Council is such an extraordinary group of leaders. I want to thank everybody who participates in the supports Bay Area Council, because this kind of civic organization is absolutely essential in keeping the relationships between government and the private sector open and healthy. And of course, to you, Barbara, thank you for your ongoing commitment and investment to California, your interest in your forward-leaning approach to doing business here, in employing Californians. And I look forward to your optimistic future, which I share, where we can participate and do many more things together.
Well, Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, Ambassador Eleni Kounalakis, and Siemens CEO Barbara Humpton. Terrific conversation. I wish we could run it longer. Thank you, large participating audience, and we'll continue these conversations. I think we opened up some issues that are going to need further conversation. I think there's no question about that. So thanks from the Bay Area Council to everyone, and thank our staff for organizing this, and everyone have a wonderful afternoon.